both arrived in the early 70s. Howard's contributed wonderfully to the area of geography and weather science and air pollution, and he will give us some of his insight. Thanks, Howard.
Now, Martin has just mentioned some of the relevant information that we need for understanding current weather situations. My interest in this whole concept of the data set is historical. Nancy and I are working on a historical air pollution analysis in Newcastle. So this fits in right in, this kind of data set fits right in with my current thinking in terms of importance. When you obtain a data set from a property in rural New South Wales or rural Australia, and the data set is meticulous, well supported with regular measurements, and I've just seen examples on the computer over here. There, along with the measurements of temperature and pressure and moisture, are comments about the individual weather circumstances on that particular day. And then you're looking at a longer term, you're looking at a record of 20 or so years, or perhaps longer than that. That fits, to me, that fills a gap. And the gap it fills is sort of overlapping or just before the period where the Bureau of Meteorology has set up their own overall measuring network, and the period in the past where we don't have records such as this, and therefore if we're going to get climate information, we have to use proxy data. And we use proxy data, things like tree rings or deep ocean records or snow records from Antarctica and whatever. So this fills the gap between those two types of data sets. And it's very, very encouraging to see a data set the quality of this one. You don't see that very often. Yes, they are around, and yes, there are climate researchers have looked at some of these in the past, but you don't see this very often in terms of the quality. Okay. Currently, such data sets are being used in different parts of the world for different reasons. For example, in my latest issue of New Scientist, there was a short discussion about how the climate scientists in England, I think at East Anglia, have recreated the weather conditions at Napoleon's surrender to the British on a ship in the English Channel from the ship's logs of weather during that particular period of time. And they can actually go back and do other things. And in the past, I've seen papers and read papers associated with weather impacts on wars, weather impacts on how weather influenced decision making. Particularly, for example, the D-Day invasions of Europe, and how important the weather factors were there in terms of deciding where to go and why. I'm not saying that that was a cause of decision making, but it's a factor within the decision making. In Australia, we can recreate past weather events that have been very important. Now, the weather period that we're talking about is from the late 1870s up to about 1907, right? So I know from reading other information that that period in the 1890s and the early 1900s was a severe drought period in Australia, particularly Eastern Australia. Neville Nichols from who used to be at Bureau of Meteorology Research Centre, but is now at Monash University, he's our age, conjoint, has done a lot of research in that area. And he was the one that actually pioneered the use of data sets, like your data set, to fit into the overall picture, to see what was going on in terms of the past history of the information. The quality has to be interpreted in terms of what we know as standard meteorological practice right now and methodology, but we know how to do that now. Okay. The critical thing is a length of time, a consistency, and an accuracy and commitment by the person or persons who are actually keeping the data sets or kept the data sets on the land. And if we can find a series of these, again, I mentioned rare, over a spatial area, then we can get a geographical picture, physical, about what some of these patterns look like. Martin has mentioned the monsoon and the ITCZ. There's also potential links to the South Pacific Oscillation associated with Antarctica, and links to the Indian Ocean oscillations associated with the Indian Ocean. And also, of course, El Nino Southern Oscillation. So all of these things come into play in terms of all of these factors and in terms of the importance of a data set like this. So I'm very happy to see this. I think it's a terrific addition to the archives here. The Bureau is certainly going to welcome it in terms of the information that they can get out of it. I see something, a data set like this, as at least one and potentially two really good postgraduate projects associated with people who are interested in climate and history. I'm an academic, what and links to, again, links up the line in terms of the various circulation patterns. So, congratulations. Thank you, sir. I think we will have a very good time with this data set.